Welcome to the Dartmouth Direct Live updates from the admissions office. I'm your host today. My name is Thandar Aung, and I am a member of class of 2012, which means I'm a senior. I'm majoring in psychology, and I'm also an intern at admissions office. Today I'm joined by our fabulous admissions officer, John Beck. John, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Sure, thanks, Thandar. So my name is John Beck. I'm a senior assistant director of admissions and a Dartmouth 9. So I'm an alum of Dartmouth. And we're here today to basically just let you know what it is we've been doing, give you a little bit of an update on the admissions process. Applications, of course, were due January 1st, and there are always lots of questions leading up to the application deadline, months and months worth of questions. You're putting together your common application, thinking about testing, etc. And so we hosted a last-minute application tips chat. I think it was December 20th, if any of you joined us for that. We also know there are lots of questions that come in after applications are due. Questions about processing materials, additional testing, what really should you be doing between when applications were due and when the decisions come out at the end of March. So basically we're here today to take all of those questions. But first of all, I sort of want to tell you, relax. There's so much intensity that, going right up into the deadline. Of course, some of you submitted applications in October and you didn't have to think about them anymore. And good for you. You had, I think, an easier few months, than some of your peers perhaps. But now is sort of the time to, exhale. Your materials are in. Get back to thinking about your courses, finishing your senior year strong, and just sort of let the process run its course. That said, though, we know there are a lot of questions that come in. Absolutely. And so we actually have a teleprompter right here. We have a producer in the studio, Chris O'Connell at 13. He's monitoring the chat. And if you have any questions, just type them into the chat window. Chris will post them on the teleprompter, and we'll take them from there. So let me just, before we don't have any questions yet, to give you a sense of what it is that we're doing right now. So every year, right around the deadline, we get lots of materials coming in. So over the past few years, of course, more and more things have been submitted electronically, which is great. It really speeds up the processing time for us. But we're still getting, over the course of a couple of weeks, thousands and thousands and thousands of documents, teacher recommendations that come in electronically, your common applications, your secondary school reports. And because all these things are coming in a relatively short period of time, they take a little while for us to load. So some of you, we might still be loading application materials for you. Some of you might not have gotten an acknowledgement from us yet, especially if you sent your application just in the past couple of days. You might not have heard back from us yet. We are definitely processing those materials. If you've mailed something in, that can take a little bit longer, so you want to give that a little bit more time. But one thing students ask a lot is, how do I know I'm an applicant? Basically, have you gotten my application? And so on our website, there's actually an application sort of check my status, and I'll ask Chris actually at some point to post a link to that check my status page in the chat. You can go there and we'll invite you to log in to what we call Applicant Online Services, or Online Applicant Service, I think it's OAS. And if you've gotten an acknowledgement email from us, we'll give you a sort of PIN code to log in there. And if you log in, you'll see that your status is an applicant. If you can't log into that, with your email address that you use in the common application, it means we haven't processed your materials yet. If you only sent them in the past couple days, don't worry about it, it's coming. If you sent them longer ago, then maybe that's something you want to follow up with us about. You might want to confirm that you're using the right email address. Sometimes students will use one email address for the common application. You've forgotten that you had one email address that you use for all your college applications, and you think about a different one that you use more often. So you might want to double check with that. But I think the Check My Status is a really great page for students to go and see, do we have your application? What's my status? And sort of feel a little bit of relief that, yeah, we've got it. So it looks like the questions are coming in, Thandar.
So are you ready, John?
I am.
Absolutely. All right, so our first question is, John, could you elaborate more on and maybe explain more about scheduling interviews? I know that's a big, topic for a lot of people out there.
Absolutely, and thanks, Sunshine, for that question. So here's how the alumni interviewing process at Dartmouth works. We actually don't do interviews on campus anymore. We really can't handle the volume, the requests for interviews that we receive. So instead we do alumni interviews, and these are basically, they're not required, but nor Thandar are they guaranteed. And so how this works is when you apply to Dartmouth, that essentially is your request for an interview. There's no other way to request an interview. There's no other process you have to or need to or should or can even go through. What happens is when we receive your application materials, we will actually communicate with people in your local area, if there are any, called district enrollment directors. These are alumni who have volunteered to coordinate alumni interviewing in their area. So when you apply to Dartmouth, we will give your contact information and the fact that you applied, and that alone. So we don't send any information about your scores or your status, your status as a candidate for us. Usually we haven't even seen any of your materials yet. So basically, your contact information, the fact you applied to one of these district enrollment directors, what they do is they will assign you to be interviewed by a local alumni interviewer if there's one available. And again, there are places in the country and places in the world where we have lots of interviewers and we reach a lot of the students there. And then, of course, there are lots of places where we don't have lots of interviewers. So traditionally, we reach about between 55 and 60% of our applicant pool will receive an interview. And if you don't receive an interview, if you're not contacted for one, don't worry at all. It's really not going to hurt you in our process. The alumni interview sort of helps us make a decision. It gives us a little bit more information, some targeted information, but it doesn't help you or hurt you just to have an interview. And so that's basically how that process works. We do have information on our website about the alumni interview. Maybe Chris, I think we've got another admissions officer, Dan Parrish, in the chat. They've posted that link, so you can go ahead if you have more questions. I definitely encourage you to check out that page.
Absolutely. Now, on a different note, Zoe Broad asked, what is a likely letter?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of you may have heard about these likely letters that some schools send out, other schools maybe don't. And so basically a likely letter, we send out a small number of likely letters every single year because we read applications sort of in, not even the order that they come in, it's sort of a random order. But some of the applications we read really early on, we can identify as being among the strongest applicants that we have that year. And so when we've given, when we've had a chance to look at a student really early on who's a strong applicant and we think that student has a good chance of being admitted in our process, we might send a likely letter in the mail to say, hey, we've already seen your file. You seem like a really strong applicant. And just to give you a little bit of those students, maybe a little bit of peace of mind that they were read really strongly in our process. And again, it really is a small number of these letters that go out, and the vast majority of our students who are ultimately admitted in regular decision don't receive likely letters, just because we're reading up until the end of, until one decisions come out. Right. We're finalizing decisions. They're really strong applicants. We don't, get to do a second read on their application until early March or the end of March. And so if you're not getting a likely letter, that doesn't mean you're not going to be competitive in our process. But hopefully that just gives you an idea of what they are and how they work.
Now, this is a question from Kenya, and she wants to know if you can still send supplements.
Yeah, Kenya, you can still send supplements. I think we actually ask for the deadline, the last day to submit art supplements is around, I think it's about next week. And so if you're still considering sending an art supplement, you want to do that as soon as possible. We've got a link up in the chat they'll instruct you how to submit additional materials. And so if you're still thinking about doing that, send it immediately, or else our faculty won't be able to process it. We won't see their comments. We won't be able to add that information to your application.
Along the same lines of application process, Jake wants to know, how do you show that Dartmouth is his first choice and he really wants to come here?
Yeah, Jake, that's a really great question. So, here in the admissions office at Dartmouth, we take your application as really sign enough that you really want to come here. We're not what is referred to as yield aware, which means we don't read applicants more strongly if they've indicated a lot of interest in Dartmouth. There are a couple reasons for that. One is, well, I had my heart broken a few years ago, and this applicant, said over over and over, Dartmouth was his #1 choice. We admitted him, not because of that, because he was a really strong applicant, and then he went elsewhere. So your minds might change, and that's fine. But the other thing is, not every student has the opportunity to express a lot of interest in Dartmouth in sort of all senses of that word. Not every applicant has the ability to travel to Dartmouth, to go to an information session on the road, to be visited in high school. And so to really keep a level playing field in the applicant process, we don't take that express interest into account. The other thing is, too, we have the advantage of having a really big and really diverse applicant pool. And so we're really going to choose our favorite students from that pool. A lot of students will have really great choices. And so it's not so important to communicate that Dartmouth is your #1 choice. We really think your application itself is communicating that enough. And again, because we're not yield aware, communicating that interest in Dartmouth to us really isn't actually all that helpful in the process.
Now we're going to go back to alumni interviews, but do you have any suggestions or tips on how to prepare for an alumni interview?
Yeah, that's another good question. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it because it's not really pronounceable, but T and then Mel, when I were actually chatting a little bit before the chat. So hello to those of you with whom I was chatting about 20 minutes ago. And so I think, there's probably I might point you to actually just resources online for how to prepare for any interview. I think the one thing that's really important to know about, well, a couple things probably that are important to know about the alumni interview from Dartmouth. It is evaluative, and so our interviewers are going to be writing reports to us that we'll read with your application, and they're trying to get a sense of really what's motivating you, what is your intellectual curiosity like, why are you doing the things that you're doing. A lot of them, they're not going to have, as I said earlier, they're not going to have your resume, they're not going to have your test score. Some of them may actually ask you for those things and definitely encourage you to bring them. But what we're trying to get out of the interview report is a deeper sense of why it is that you're doing the things you're doing. We talk about some of these intangible qualities in our application process. So there's intellectual curiosity, personal qualities as well. And so I think just reflecting a little bit on your high school experience and what's motivated you can be a great way to prepare for that interview. And then apart from that, well, actually I should back up and say the other thing that's important to know is that even while the interview is evaluative, it's also sort of an informational interview for you. It's a really great opportunity for those of you, especially if you haven't had a chance to visit Dartmouth before, to actually sit down and speak with a Dartmouth alum, get a sense of what his or her experience was like here, ask that person some questions, and learn a little bit more about Dartmouth. And so for the rest of the preparation, I think there are just some logistical things. So you want to make sure that you know where you're going for the interview. Definitely, if you're contacted for an interview, you want to respond to that, in a timely manner. Right? Our alumni tend to be really, really busy people, and so you want to sort of respect that they're really volunteering to do this to give you a chance to tell us more about you, and so you want to really honor that and get back to them as quickly as possible. We are having a little bit of trouble with our teleprompter here.
Yes.
I think we've got one question that we can see. Maybe our producer can help us out with that. But I'll take the next question.
All right. Well, if you are a deferred ED student, how does that work with the regular application process and the applicant pool? If you could explain a little more about it.
Yeah, great question. And so, of course, we had an early decision round this year. We did defer a number of students. And what a deferral really means, and if you've been deferred, I think you already have this information, but it means that, you were read pretty strongly in an early decision. We want to see you sort of in the context of the rest of the applicant pool. We also might be interested in seeing how your candidacy develops over the next couple months. And so what you want to do is basically just continue to work hard. I think that's one thing, first of all. We're going to have, or your guidance counselors will know to send us the mid-year, your mid-year grades. That's an update that's going to come into our office. If you're taking a class senior year and you really like a teacher in one of those classes, typically, if you're applying early decision, you haven't had a chance to get to know teachers in your senior classes, and so maybe your recommenders were from junior year. If you have a teacher senior year who you think might add something new to your file, you can ask that person to write an additional recommendation for you. And then lastly, we ask for sometime in early February or so, just an update from you. Let us know how is your senior year going? Are there any new awards that you've won? Or a lot of our applicants are working on these really interesting projects, and you can give us an update on maybe a project that you've been working on, perhaps something you just were able to only mention in your application earlier in the fall. And so that's basically it. Typically, over the last few years, our early decision deferred candidates have been admitted at about the same rate as our regular decision applicants. So it really is sort of a new look for you, and you're given a chance, just like all of our other regular decision applicants. So I hope that's helpful for you. And yeah, I think we can take the next question.
Absolutely. Now, we all know colleges can be very expensive, and so if you could elaborate more on the difference between FAFSA and CSS, and what do we accept, and also when are they due?
Sure, Thandar. So I'm not a financial aid expert, but I'll give this one a go as I can. And for actually deadlines, I'm a little bit less clear on those. And so I'll have Chris post the link to our financial aid website, also the financial aid section of our admissions website, to give you a sense of deadlines. So for U.S. citizens, if you're applying for financial aid, we do require the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and the CSS profile that's from the College Board. And the CSS profile just gives us a little bit more information than the FAFSA about your family's assets and debts and things like that. Now, the good news about Dartmouth is that, well, there are a couple bits of good news. First of all, Dartmouth is need blind across the entire first-year applicant pool. And if you've applied to Dartmouth, hopefully you'll already know this. But we're need blind not just for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, but also for international applicants. I think we're one of maybe half a dozen schools in the U.S. That's need blind for the entire first-year applicant pool. And what that means, for those of you who might not be familiar with the term need blind, what it means is that if you're applying for financial aid when you apply to Dartmouth, it doesn't make the process any more competitive for you. It's not disadvantageous whatsoever if you're applying for financial aid. We don't put you in a more selective pool. We don't have a quota or a cap on the number of financial aid applicants we can admit. We also don't have a cap on our financial aid dollars. The next thing is we actually guarantee to meet 100% of demonstrated need as determined by the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So what happens is when you apply to Dartmouth and you're applying for financial aid, you'll send those documents into our office. Our financial aid officers will determine how much your family can be expected to pay based on that information. We'll then take the total cost of attending Dartmouth, tuition, room, board, books, fees, expenses, health insurance, etc., subtract your family contribution, a little bit of a student contribution as well, and you'll be given financial aid to cover the difference. So about 47% or so of Dartmouth students are on financial aid. The average financial aid package, I believe, for the class of 2015, that's the first-year students this year, is about $35,500. So it's a major commitment. Certainly higher education in the U.S. isn't cheap. It is, however, at Dartmouth affordable because we're really committed to our need blind process and meeting 100% of demonstrated need. If you've applied to Dartmouth already and you haven't done this and you're sort of anxious to hear what sort of financial aid you might be awarded if you're admitted, we do have on our financial aid website the financial aid calculator. Actually, all universities now are required to have the calculator on their website. We've had one on our website for years. Yeah. We updated a little bit so it looks like the other ones that are out there, so it's, I think, easier to use. But you can go there. You'll need your family's, tax information, assets, things like that, because in order to give you an accurate picture of what your financial aid might be, we're obviously going to need the information that goes into determining what your financial aid is. So it takes a little bit of time to fill that out, but if you're really wondering what that package might look like if you're admitted, that's, I think, a great opportunity to go into that financial aid calculator and get a sense of what that might be.
Yep. John, I know you were talking a little bit about mid-year report before, but could you clarify if Dartmouth needs a mid-year report or an end-of-year report for CHALS?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do require both, really. So the mid-year report and the end-of-year report for admitted students. We require the mid-year report from everyone. And the mid-year report is much like the secondary school report that you already had your guidance counselor send us. So it's something that comes from your school, and basically what it does is it tells us, well, maybe what it sounds like, your mid-year grades. So some schools, the sort of the deadline for there isn't a solid deadline because Some schools end, if they're on a quarter system, a marking period system, it might end in mid-December, it might end mid-January. So these things sort of come in when they come in, but we do require those. And again, for admitted students, we will require the end-of-year report. I see we're getting a question here about, speaking of the mid-year report,
yes.
grades, maybe senioritis creeping in. Absolutely, we expect, and this is really serious, students to, all of our applicants, and especially our admitted students, to maintain the same trajectory, to graduate from high school with a similar profile they had when we admitted you. I think that, when we admit students, especially maybe even early decision, we sort of accept in good faith that you're going to keep up the work that you've done to get you where you are and make you the impressive candidates that you are. And so I think you in good faith should also, sort of honor that expectation and maintain those grades. Definitely, senior year, some students might be taking the most challenging courses they've ever taken in high school. And we will absolutely, if you've gotten all A's so far and you end up with a couple of B's senior year, that's going to be okay. But if you go from an A student or an A student with a couple of B's and you're getting C's and D's in the second half of senior year, we do from time to time, actually, we will rescind admission for students whose academic performance totally just drops off the map. And so keep up the great work. And I think sort of just and maybe on a personal level, you've worked really hard, and I think that, it's just, I can't imagine at least thinking back in high school and thinking I didn't do everything I could. And also, I think you want to come to Dartmouth and be in this challenging academic environment, having maintained a level of academic performance that you yourself have grown accustomed to. And so for all those reasons, I encourage you to maintain that focus. We know that college is really exciting. We know 4 years of high school can, toward the end of it, you feel like you're ready to be done with it. But definitely encourage you to maintain that performance.
All right, well, I have a question from an accepted student who wants to know how they can go about updating Dartmouth on the awards and recognition, speaking of keeping up the good work.
Yeah,
to
sure.
Dartmouth admissions.
So if you've been accepted, we really aren't going to need any updates about new achievements for you. We'll still require that mid-year. Oh, I see. Our producer is telling us accepted is your username. So someone who's being a little optimistic. Well, that's great. I hope that works out for you and end up being accepted. But it's a great name. And so if you have updates for the admissions office, the quickest way and really the best way to have them added to your file is to email them to our admissions processing website, and that's admissions.processing@dartmouth.edu. I really discourage students from sending updates directly to admissions officers because we're reading applications, we're really busy. Some of us will go an entire day or day and a half without checking email. And then when we do check email, we're really prioritizing things that need immediate attention. And I think those updates don't always make that cut for us, and it could be a week before we even forward them on. And all we're going to do when we get those emails is actually just forward them to admissions.processing@dartmouth.edu. So really that's the best, and it's not the only way. I mean, eventually things will be added if you route them a different direction. But the quickest way, the best way, is to email updates to admissions.processing@dartmouth.edu.
Thank you. Now, Shell, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but she wants to know if you will accept January SAT and ACT scores. I know the deadlines can be a little fuzzy for a lot of people.
Yeah, sure, and we do. So year to year are the last testing dates that students can take, tests and submit those courses at Dartmouth to be right with your applications. It's always been the month that the application is due. For early decision, our ED deadline is November 1st. We can take November testing. For regular decision, our deadline is January 1st, and we can accept January testing. And if you're taking testing in January, though, and you want it to be considered with your application, if you want us to get it, you don't need to rush your scores, but you do need, when you register for those exams, to make sure that Dartmouth is among the schools that you want your scores to be sent to, because otherwise we may not receive it in time to consider with your application. So we'll get the scores, but you do need to have them sent to Dartmouth, which I think makes sense.
Yeah. Our next question is, if you go to, a really big public school, I know I definitely resonate with this question because I went to a really big public school and there were a lot of applicants from my school. Now, how do I compare? Does that affect my chances of getting in?
Such a great question. So I really appreciate that. Just as we're not yield aware when reading when we're reading applicants, we don't really read by school or by state or by region or by expressed interest in major. Our sort of philosophy, and we'll come back to that question more directly, in building a class is that we put all the work in on the front end. So we believe that if we recruit, if we attract enough, applicants, the kinds of people that we ultimately want to see in the class, and that pool is diverse enough, we don't have to build that diverse class through the reading process, right? I don't have to, look at a high school and think, oh, we have too many from this one and not enough from this one. I don't have to find that proverbial, it's always an oboe player, right, that gets talked about from North Dakota, because those students are already in our pool. And so we're just going to read the applications we have, pick our favorite students, and we'll end up with the kind of class we want to see because we've put in that work, in the fall and even the spring before. So specifically about high schools, no, it doesn't matter at all. We don't have any caps or quotas. You'll hear me say that time and time again for lots of things on any particular high schools. And I think actually that can drive guidance counselors crazy sometimes because we might, and this has happened in my time here, admit almost everyone that applies from a high school one year and then no one the next out of, it could be 15 applicants. The thing about small numbers in the scheme of 23,000 plus applications, 15 from a high school, it's a pretty small number. And, numbers can look funny sometimes. But again, we get this question a lot, especially around early decision too. Someone might be really excited for Dartmouth and then go back to the high school and all of a sudden lots of people are excited about Dartmouth. They're thinking, oh, this is hurt my chances. It really doesn't at all. We're looking for students who are strong achievers in context, but also in the context of our overall pool, and you're not competing directly against anyone, particularly not anyone from your high school.
All right, well, looking ahead, we have Dimensions in April. It's actually the weekend of 19th and 21st. I have another question from Zoe about Dimensions. Can all students, or do all students go to Dimensions?
Not all of them go, but certainly all students that we admit regular decision are invited to attend Dimensions. And if you were admitted regular decision, I definitely encourage you to attend Dimensions. Did you go to Dimensions, Thandar?
I didn't because I was an early student.
You were an early student.
Yes, I was already in.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to Dartmouth.
So you didn't need that period to decide. I was also an early decision admit. So,
but they definitely allowed early decision students to drop by and experience.
So you're going to be working on planning Dimensions. So do you want to talk a little bit about it and what happens at Dimensions and why should someone come to Dimensions?
I can definitely do that. So as part of my intern project with the other interns at the office, Dimensions is a big project for all of us, and we're so excited to see you guys on campus. So we're working really, really hard. We're already working really hard, and it's only January, and Dimensions is in April. It's pretty much a 3-day weekend on campus at Dartmouth in Hanover, where we invite you to come over and see the Dartmouth that we love and that we want to share with you all. So, transportation and meal plans, I believe. Transportation and meal plans and hosting are provided for regular students.
So transportation is provided for everyone.
Yes.
So for students who qualify, depends on your financial need. We will fund a number of students who are coming from the U.S. For Dimensions transportation.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Once you're here, you will be hosted, and then, it's a really good experience in terms of being able to talk to a current Dartmouth student and learning about their, what do they do in a daily life. But we also have a lot of programs scheduled for you, and we're working really hard on it. We're going to have different rooms talking about, people's off-campus programs and people's research programs, and we're probably going to also to have professors, this amazing lecturers giving you a sneak peek of what it would be like to have a class at Dartmouth. So that's just a brief presentation.
Yeah,
but we also have many tours, of course, available, and just it's going to be a wonderful time. But I'm also very biased right now.
Definitely. Well, we start planning Dimensions basically as soon as the one before it ends. So we've been planning for Dimensions since May of last year, and I think one of the things that I've really loved to see, just in my time at Dartmouth, both as a student and as an alum and admissions officer, is just how excited the campus gets to welcome prospective students to come to Dartmouth. And I think that it's really during Dimensions. I mean, we've got more students who want to volunteer for Dimensions than we have the capacity for, really, from hosts to a cappella groups who are dying to perform for you.
We had improv, comedy shows.
There's just so much happening. And I think so many students, it's sort of a cliche to say that Dartmouth is a place that needs to be seen. But I think a lot of students have made their decisions to come to Dartmouth when they were here at Dimensions. And so that's just a little brief teaser, I think, on Dimensions. But if you're admitted our regular decision, I definitely encourage you to come.
All right. So, I hope you do come if you get accepted, and we'll see you on campus. Now, I'm just going to go back to the question about reading abs. Can you elaborate more about, I know you touched upon that you read by regions maybe. Can you just talk to me more about
sure.
it?
So the question is, do we read by region? How does that work? And maybe reading into the question a little bit, do we have, regional officers, or do you have, sort of your admissions officer that you should be in touch with? I think is sort of the gist of the question that we're getting. And so what's confusing about this is that a lot of our peer schools, a lot of pilot type of schools have very different processes for how they read applications. Some schools use lots of committee, for instance, where maybe there's one admissions officer who reads every application from Michigan, and that person will select his or her 37 favorite applications and go to committee, sort of advocate for those students. That's one method. We really don't do that at all. We actually do very little committee here at Dartmouth. And our reading process is a little bit more randomized. We will sort of try to read applications from schools that we visited, or from areas that we visited. One of the reasons that we go out on the road every fall is not just to go to high schools and recruit students to build up our pool, but it's also to get a sense of what are those communities like. And I'm not going to describe this too much in detail because I can go on and on about our process and reading in context and what that means. I remember for me that idea of being read in the context of sort of my environment was really important to me, coming from sort of a little town in upstate New York. And so I was wondering, how do I compete with these students who are going to these big schools with lots of AP courses, et cetera. And so when we travel, we get a sense of, what are the opportunities in places, what are these communities like, what's sort of normal, what might we reasonably expect from a student coming from that particular community. And so because of that, when we come back to the office, it makes sense to try to read applications from those communities if we visited them. But besides that, it's a first read, second read, decision read. Sometimes it'll come back to another read process. And a lot of our decision making happens in the reading process. And you definitely don't necessarily have your admissions officer. And again, because the reading process is going to go to a second reader anyway, you don't have to feel the need to build a relationship with that particular person. I know that, because we see a lot of this happening, and I know that for some schools, that's probably definitely the way to go. And so there's advice out there that you need to find out who your admissions officer is and build a relationship with that person. I think for your sake, it's not necessary for Dartmouth. It's not going to help you. And I always I really actually feel sort of sorry for students who have this pressure put on them to not only do you need to put together a really good application, but then you need to find your officer, continue to impress that person. And I'll receive emails, every year in January. And if you've seen me on the road, I've probably said this already. But, getting an email like, hi, Mr. Beck. I think it's funny that people call me Mr. Beck, but they do. Just trying to find some reason to email me. And I can tell that they were really anxious writing that email, which is also strange to me because it's just me. But trying to just think up something that's relevant, and the connection could be really tenuous. Something like, I just had some really good pizza, and it reminded me of the pizza I had at Dartmouth, and I really love Dartmouth. And I'm thinking, that's not going to further your candidacy. But again, what I'm thinking about is that poor student is probably so anxious, thinking of a reason to email me, or whoever your admissions officer is. And again, the idea of your admissions officer doesn't really carry any weight in our office. Relax. As I said right at the beginning of this chat, your materials are in. Sort of focus on school again. Let the process, work itself. We're reading applications for a really long time. There's a lot happening here. And so don't worry so much about making that connection with a particular officer, because chances are that person's not going to read your application. And even if I'm a first reader on an applicant, that doesn't mean I'm the decider on that applicant. I might really, really like you. In fact, I like we like most of the applications that we read, most assistants we read, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be admitted just because one person really likes you. It doesn't mean you're not going to be admitted because one person didn't like your essay. And so, again, just relax a little bit and let the process work itself out. And I think that's maybe some of the most important advice I can give you this time of year.
Along the same lines of application reading, William wants to know if you have a really memorable essay during your time at Dartmouth admissions.
Yeah, William, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer your question. And the reason I'm not going to answer it is because most of our applicants, maybe, I don't know if you're a junior or you're just curious, and that's great, but we're talking to a group of students who have just submitted their applications. They've fretted over their essays for a really long time. And I don't want to, by giving an example of an essay that I really liked, have 300 people think their essays were terrible and I'm not going to like them. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on you. I see the comment coming in. They were just curious. I'll be happy. Maybe you can email me. I actually still, Thandar, even when I'm on the road, when I'm talking about the admissions process, I really do like talking about our process because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we try to be as transparent as we can be. I think this is an example of that, and really just give you guys the idea that, you know, it's people reading your applications. Here we are. We'll tell you how our process works. And so when I talk about the essay, I do like to give advice about it. I never give an example of a really great essay because I don't want to steer people's thinking too narrowly. There are so many ways to write a great essay. I don't want to sort of pigeonhole you into one particular style or direction. So anyway, William, that's a long-winded answer, but I can elaborate more if you're curious. Maybe if you're admitted to Dartmouth and come next year, we can chat about it. But for the rest of you, I'm not going to touch that one this time of year.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So now that the applications are in, have you started reading them, John?
We have. I was reading today. I'll be reading tomorrow. I'll be reading the next day. Saturday, Sunday, I'll be reading applications until sometime around mid-March. So that's the life of the admissions officer in winter. Yeah.
It's all good. We're all hibernating in Hanover, you know.
Yeah, definitely, right? It's not so bad. I guess if it were the summer, it would be a little trickier.
Yeah, but I'm actually taking snowboarding, so it's going to be very fun.
That's fantastic. We don't have any snow yet, so does the skiway have snow?
Though,
the skiway is making
it's
snow?
It's going to be okay, everything.
It's been cold enough here in New England that the ski resorts have been able to make snow, but for us poor folk who like to cross-country ski or people who like to ice skate or ice fish, they've really been out of luck so far. But I heard maybe there's snow coming tonight or tomorrow night, so
I think so.
Perhaps we'll see.
Yes. Well, moving on to another question.
Yeah, definitely.
There are different components in the application process. So how would you say, you know, extracurriculars, GPAs, and test scores, how do they weigh in terms of the holistic experience?
Right, definitely. And I think you've almost already answered the question, which is there's a holistic review process here. And you know, one of the most common answers, one of the most frustrating answers in admissions is it depends. And it really does. I think for every applicant, sort of how their candidacy sort of, you know, what are the highlights, what is the sort of the gist, how would you summarize that candidacy, really differs from applicant to applicant. I think, you know, there are 4 things that we consider in our process, roughly. There are tangible academic achievement, intangible intellectual character, we refer to as intellectual curiosity, your extracurricular involvement, which for us is really a question of impact. I think we're always trying to get a sense of, you know, is your high school, is your community, is your home different because you were there? I think Dartmouth is an amazing place, and it's 242 years old, 243 years old this year, 2012. It's small enough, though, and it's intimate enough that you can change it in your 4 years. And so we're looking for students who have shown a willingness and ability to do that over the last 4 years. So that impact. And then lastly, you know, personal qualities. I think those are really important as well. You know, this is just, are you a nice person? Do you have a sense of humor? Sometimes that'll come through in an application. I always encourage students when I say that if you don't have a sense of humor, not to try to have one in the application. That rarely works out for students. This is just, I sort of want to know, you know, if I run into you in the green one day and I chose to admit you, am I going to feel good about that? Am I going to feel bad about that? So these are the personal qualities. And all these things are coming together to give us a sense of, you know, who you are. And who you are in a moment in time, certainly. But I think if you think about the essays you're writing, the recommendations. We ask for the peer recommendation, of course. We're getting a pretty good sense of who you are. And so because everyone's different, how much your extracurriculars define your candidacy, how much your GPA or your testing, the classes you've taken, defines your candidacy, that's really going to vary from person to person. I think academics, of course, are really important. Most of our students are applying with really great scores. And we're really trying to get a sense of these other things as well. When I'm talking about academics, though, it's important to talk about context. We mentioned that before. And so all of these things we're looking at in sort of your context. Where are you coming from? What challenges have you had? What opportunities have you had? And the applicants that are strongest are the ones that are really standing out in their own context. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Well, John, are you ready to take another question, or would you like to elaborate on something that hasn't been touched upon so far?
Definitely. I think we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. We've got a question here from Hopeful. How important is the peer rec? So Hopeful, yes, we're hopeful as well. And so the peer recommendation, again, it's our only supplement. It's not really our only supplement. Our other supplement is the first year. I think it's called the first year supplement to the Common Application. You might have already even forgotten about sending that in because basically it asks for your name and address. We asked you what you might be interested in studying, what some of your extracurricular interests might be. But the other one is the peer recommendation. So we don't ask for additional essays or anything like that. So for the peer recommendation, basically, it's just another look into who you are. I think we're building here at Dartmouth not just an academic community, but a residential one as well. And I think that, who you are outside the classroom, sort of, what your friends would say about you really does matter. Actually, when I was a senior here at Dartmouth, I used to do some interviews. I don't know if you'll be doing interviews this winter.
Yes, I am.
And I talked about doing alumni interviews, and that's true. We do alumni interviews everywhere but the Upper Valley because so many alumni here work for the college. So we actually have senior interns in the admissions office do interviews for the local applicants. And I remember one of my favorite questions to ask was, if I were talking with your 5 closest friends right now, what would they say about you? And that's what we're trying to get a sense of in the peer recommendation. I talked about those 4 qualities we're considering, right? The tangible academics, the intangible intellectual curiosity, the impact, and the personal qualities. We're really getting a sense of some of those intangible qualities in the peer recommendation. I think they're really inspirational to read. They're often one of my favorite parts of the application to read. I think a lot of students might be surprised by just the depth of feeling that your friends have for you, and you have for your friends, I'm sure. And it's just really remarkable to see some of that. I mean, some of them really sort of get me choked up, and it's just it's great. And so if you haven't had your peer recommendations sent in yet, definitely do so as quickly as possible. If you can have your friends type those letters, it makes it a lot easier for us to read them. They also should be sent to admissions.processing@dartmouth.edu to be added to your file as soon as they can be. So, Thandar, I think we're going to wrap up.
And this
has been a really wonderful chat. We've had a lot of people in here. I hope this was helpful for you and you had a lot of your questions answered. I know we're getting a lot of questions about student life, and that wasn't exactly the focus of this chat, but the good news is we actually have a lot of great ways, I think, to learn about life at Dartmouth on the internet without even visiting here. So one is, of course, just by looking around the Dartmouth Direct website. So we've got, I think there are 9 students in the class of 2015 who have been blogging about their experience so far. They're really wonderful. I've just loved how
I always check them out, and it really brings back freshman memories for me. But not only that, they're very excited to have you guys on board, and they can't stop blogging about it. So please check them out. They're wonderful.
And they love comments in their posts too. So if you're going to read some of their posts, definitely comment, start a discussion. Ask them direct questions. Maybe they'll write a post about something you've asked about. So that's Dartmouth Direct. We're doing another Dartmouth Direct live show this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so same time as tonight. And the subject of that one will really be just a student forum. So we do these student forums on campus where we've got interns, answering questions of students. Not everyone, of course, can visit, so we do them online as well. So 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. I definitely encourage you to check that out as well. We'll probably be doing those every other week or so through January and February. I also want to let you know we'll have a financial aid chat in early February, so if you have financial aid questions, definitely come by for a chat. The date and time, exact date and time for that is to be determined, but that's coming up. So thank you again for joining, everyone. We're looking forward to reading your applications, definitely. But do try to relax to the extent that you can. The end of March is a long time away. So get back, thinking about school.
Enjoy the rest of your senior year. It's just a wonderful time, and enjoy the time with friends and family at home. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Have a good night.
you. Good night.